leaving high control religion, I know that you might be looking through videos in order to find some kind of support, in order to find some kind of, well, me too. She gets me. This is what I need to hear. Before we get into it, thank you so much for subscribing. We just hit 1,000 subscribers. How cool is that? Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and also hit that little bell at the top, because that lets you know whenever I post something, you'll be the first to know. And if you're interested, we have a little community over here on TikTok, so feel free to go and hang out with us in the comments over there. Hannah, thank you so much for being on the show. It's such an honor to have you here. How about you introduce yourself to our audience, give a little bit of your background.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for having me. My name is Hannah Brown. I am a licensed mental health therapist in the state of Texas, as well as a money coach. So I have a therapy practice where I see individual clients, and then I also help millennial women, kind of younger women, figure out their finances so that they can feel more empowered managing their money and just not feel so broke all of the time.
Oh, and let me tell you, that is very much needed on this channel and this community. To give you a little bit of background, a large majority of our audience is survivors of narcissistic abuse, those who are in it currently and looking for a way out, and also in high control religion, predominantly Jehovah's Witnesses. In pre-production, we talked a great deal about how people who are in this religion, they don't really have financial literacy. And one of the biggest reasons for that is because for the majority of us who are raised in that organization, you're taught the world is going to end. And the most famous quote that they tell us is, why polish the brass on a sinking ship? So if the world is ending, why invest in your future? So because of that, higher education is frowned upon. Bettering yourself in any way is frowned upon. And maybe you run into this in many religions, is that money is evil. So can speak to that and the basics of financial literacy and whatever that looks like for someone in their, and we'll get into age specific, like retirement for people who have nothing. We devote our whole life to this organization voluntarily, and there's no kickback at the end of our, there is no ending the volunteer work. So just to give you a little bit of backstory on that.
Yeah. So I think with a lot of it is you have to start small. And so we're all on kind of our own different journey. We've all had different lived experiences, and that affects our finances. And I mean, religion or not, a lot of us are not given a financial education. We don't really learn that in school unless you have caregivers or friends or family that teach you these things. We're all kind of like starting from square one. It's just at maybe a different time, you know?
So what do you do when you suddenly wake up, you're a parent, you have kids, and you realize, I know nothing. I'll be honest, I'm totally open with throwing myself out there with being honest. I'm 41 and I just got a credit card that was in my name only, not my husband's. And I'm sure many women who are viewing this may be in the same predicament. So starting with the basics, can we start with what kind of questions do you ask? There's a lot of gurus out there too. So there's a lot of, get into crypto and invest. What is, where do we start? Kind of like when you're a teenager, just getting your first account.
I think first, especially as like an adult where you have, control over your finances now, is figuring out like what your starting position is. So, do I even know, let's say, for example, how much money I'm bringing in per month versus what I'm spending per month is a really good place to start. And creating a very basic budget, like don't overlook the utility of these basics. I think it may feel, especially if you feel like you're starting at a later age of, I'm so behind, I have to catch up. But we first need to like not overlook the basics of knowing where our money is going, being able to kind of track our spending in that way. But also I think the most important thing is to figure out what are your goals for yourself. So don't just be like, I need to invest to retire. Like, what is it? Is there a certain age you want to retire? What do you want your lifestyle to look like? do I want to save for a house, or do I want to save for this thing? Like, what are those unique goals for your situation? Because I think a lot of times we just take on advice from all of these people out there. There's a lot of different like people we can follow, but we don't take the time to actually think like, does this apply to my situation? And how can I, if it does, how can I maybe make it even more specific to my situation? Because a lot of that advice is very like broad overview and may not necessarily relate or be specific for what your needs are.
Okay, interesting. I did an Instagram poll, and one of the questions on there is, how do I plan for my future? For retirement was the word used, when I have nothing, when I have no education. It's not like this person can go and get a job with some company that's going to give them a 401k. I think the overall question is for people who are, I would say, in their 30s to 60s. Now what? What is the best starting off point? Yes, figure out your budget, your debt to income ratio, figure all of that out. But trying to start anew, do you walk in and get a checking account? Do you get a savings account? I'm talking basic stuff.
Yeah. I think first, the basic things would be to have a checking account and then to have a savings account. So if you have, $0 for retirement, then what are some options? Like maybe I should start saving just money in general. Like we also need to have a savings for, let's say an emergency pops up, or, something happens and you don't have the money to finance that. You don't necessarily want all of that money wrapped up in investments that you can't liquidate. So the first basic step is to open a checking account and then have a savings account where you can put extra money in, whether that's when you get paid or whatever's kind of in your bank account at that point. And don't overlook the small steps of putting $5 or $10 in there every paycheck, or, very small amounts. Those add up over time, and we all have to kind of start somewhere. So don't get so wrapped up in this, like, I need $1 million invested in order to retire. That may just not be financially feasible for you, and that's okay. But maybe eventually you can have some money invested. So maybe you don't have to work full-time anymore. Or you can start having money saved so that when an emergency comes up, you don't have to put it on a credit card and go more into debt, or, take out a loan or something that is going to put more of a financial burden on you later.
Excellent. Fact or fiction? Putting money in the bank, especially recently, is a bad idea.
I don't think so. No.
I heard that, and I just want to know, okay, because there are I'm on TikTok all the time, and don't put your money in the bank. Take your money out of the bank and invest it in crypto or this or that. And I mean, it's a lot. And then when we do get a little bit of money in the bank, it's like, oh, should I take it out? What should I do? So can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to your goals and not just taking things at our face value for what they are, like doing a little bit of more research into those things and really asking yourself, like, does this apply to me? So, for example, you do need to have some money saved that you can liquidate easily. Once you are investing in things, it's not as easy to cash them out, especially without paying penalties and fees. So you need to have some sort of savings. I mean, I prefer to have them in a bank account just because I feel safe versus having, thousands of dollars just at my house in cash. Right. But again, it just goes back to your needs. So everyone's going to be different. And that may be like, I feel comfortable with this amount in my bank account, let's say, versus another person is going to have a completely different amount that they feel safe and secure with. And so that's why it's really important to get in touch with what your goals are versus just kind of like assuming these blanket statements are true for you and you need to do those things,
Yeah, because everybody's a guru.
Yes. Yeah. Well, especially on TikTok. It's everyone knows everything.
Everybody's the foremost authority. One of the questions I had is that if you notice, for example, Chase Bank, to keep a savings account, you need minimum $225 or something in there. So that's basically $225 you can't ever touch. Now, I look at it as a good thing. Like, we're going to hold this for you. But
Yeah.
why do banks do that as opposed to having a checking account that doesn't require anything? And which is the smarter decision to make?
So I always recommend, like I personally use Capital One 360. They have totally free savings accounts. You don't have to have a minimum amount. Same with their checking accounts. So do your research into making sure that you're finding a bank that fits your needs and that doesn't have all these extra fees and charges, because that's just another way for them to make more money. And I mean, really, when you're putting your money in a bank account, the bank is then using that money to loan to other people. And that's why you get interest back and things like that. And that may be why they have like these certain requirements of how much you need to have in there as a minimum. But make sure when you're looking at checking and savings accounts that there's no fees involved with them, or if there is, like, is that because you have to have a minimum amount in there? I don't like to mess with any of that. Ally is also really good online banking that doesn't have like an in-person bank, but they don't have any overdraft fees or things like that. So that's also something really important to look at when you're doing your research into these bank accounts, because you want to make sure that they have your best interest too.
Perfect. I used to use Capital One 360 and I totally forgot about that. The only thing I didn't like was when I needed money, it took like a couple of days. But I think that's the whole point of saving, is that it's not immediate.
Yeah. Well, especially if you have a checking account with them, you can easily transfer your money. And that's something else important too, is like, am I going to need access to this money pretty frequently? Then maybe I do want like a checking and savings account through the same provider versus maybe having a savings account at this bank versus like a checking account at that bank. You need to know kind of when you're going to need to access this money and how long it would take if you did need to access it all of a sudden too.
I see. And when it comes to debit cards versus credit cards, can you talk to, because when you put money in the checking account, you get a debit card. And can you speak to the difference of the two of them and which one is more beneficial? Obviously, with the credit card, you can build credit. But what are some of the downsides to each, or which is more beneficial for someone who has no idea about these things?
So debit card would be, like you said, from your checking account. And so when you go and check out at places, you're usually most times entering in your PIN, and then they're taking that money out right away. So let's say you have $100 in there, you just go spend $50. Now you automatically have only $50 in your checking account. And versus a credit card where you are charging the account or charging the item or whatever you're buying onto the card, and then you pay it off later. So they're essentially kind of like loaning you this money. And then they charge you interest if you don't pay off the credit card in time. So I personally don't see credit cards as bad. I know there's a lot of like, oh, credit cards are evil, don't use credit cards. But it goes back to how you utilize them. So a lot of times the downfall with credit cards is that people will charge maybe more than they actually have in their card, because you're essentially given a credit limit, which says the bank will let you spend up to, let's say, like $5,000 as your credit limit. And then after that, you can't spend anymore until you pay off your bill.
Right.
Versus a debit card is like, you open up your bank account and it says $400. That's how much you have to spend before they're going to start charging you like overdraft fees. So sometimes with credit cards, people can not quite have a handle on how much they're spending. They can tend to kind of overspend. And then if you're having to carry a balance on those credit cards month to month, you're paying very high interest fees. Most credit cards are like 15 to 25% interest on your charges, which is a lot of money. But sometimes we have to use credit cards in emergencies, or if that is like the only option you have, then sometimes we have to do what we have to do. But if you can use credit cards responsibly, they can be a really good tool to boost your credit. But if you also abuse those, then it can also really hurt your credit too. So you have to be kind of careful and know yourself with utilizing credit cards in that way.
And what is a good way to establish credit when you don't have any. You know, you walk into a bank,
Yep.
and I experienced this. I've been an authorized user on my husband's credit cards for years, just thinking la-di-da, you know, but I wanted something for myself. And there is no shame in that, which I really want to stress that to our viewers. There is no
Yes.
shame in wanting, acquiring, and building financial literacy. But you walk into a bank and you don't get approved because you don't have
Mm-hmm.
established credit, or because of your life of volunteer work and a high control religion, your
Mm-hmm.
credit's kind of shabby. So what are some ways
Yeah.
around that?
Yeah.
It's like getting a job that needs experience, but you don't have the experience to get
It's a
the job.
catch-22, right? You're like,
Yeah,
how do
yeah,
I do this?
right.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is if you do have someone in your life that is a trusted financial resource, they can add you as an authorized user, which helps you to kind of build a little bit of credit history. But also looking at your credit report. So if you go on like annualcreditreport.com, you can download your credit report history one time a year for free. It's like through the government. It's not no like charges or anything. But that can tell you if you have any delinquencies or any issues, and kind of solving those, contacting the creditors, paying up some of those can help your credit score. But then specifically looking for credit cards that are meant to help you build your credit. So you can do a Google search, and there will be most of those will be cards where you have to pay like a deposit down, and then you get to spend that money.
Yes.
But then they're reporting that you're using this credit card responsibly, you're paying off your bill, and that is going to increase your credit score over time. So you may have to start with one of those options before you can, like, say, like go to like a Chase and get approved for one of their credit cards or something like that. So just starting off with something where you're maybe having to put a deposit down on the credit card, and it seems like, okay, I'm putting this deposit to then spend this money. It seems pointless, but it will help you build your credit over time, which is important.
And it takes time. So for example, I have a credit card linked to one bank where I have a checking account. And when I use that credit card, I pay it off immediately just by making it. So I don't look at having credit as, oh, wow, like this, I will not use my credit card unless I have the money to actually put back onto the credit card. Is that a smart way to establish?
Yeah. So I think definitely you have to know yourself and how organized you are. So, I mean, I will charge most of my charges onto a credit card for the travel benefits, and some other good perks with credit cards is that it's a lot more secure with your purchases. So if your card ever gets hacked or something, it's not like you're trying to get this money back versus a debit card. If someone gets your debit card information and they're taking money out of your account, like you have to go through all of these processes with your bank to get that money back, versus a credit card. You can be like, I didn't make that purchase. So that's like a little bit of a relief sometimes with that. But I put all of my purchases on a credit card, and then at the end of the month, I pay it off in full so that we're not paying any interest on it. But if I know a lot of people where right as soon as I make the purchase, I go and pay it off. You kind of find a process that works for you, but definitely using a credit card in a way of, I'm not carrying a balance. I'm almost treating my credit card like a debit card, but it's not like I have to go in and manually make a payment on it, or you can set it to auto pay and have it auto pay once a month and pay off the card. So being organized is also important with it too.
And what about, I keep hearing this, a certain amount of your balance paid by the end of your billing cycle. So is it true that paying off your balance every single time doesn't actually help your credit, but leaving a certain amount on there does? Or is that a myth? What is the truth of that?
Yeah, that is a myth. So what they're referring to is like credit bureaus will pull your credit report, or like they'll look into your credit. So they look into every account that you own. So usually that's on like your statement date, and you can actually call any of the credit card providers or anything, and you can ask them, when do you pull my credit every month? And they have a day. So on that day, let's say it's the 15th of the month, they're looking at your account and they're like, okay, she's used $1,000 of her $3,000 credit limit. But then I paid off, like 3 days later. They don't know that necessarily, and so you want to utilize your credit, but they look at the history of it too. So never carry a balance just because you feel like it's going to improve your credit score. That's a myth for sure. Only carry a balance if it's like, I physically cannot pay this off, and that's why I'm carrying a balance.
I'm really glad you said that. And also, I just realized this recently, and I know there's more people on there like me, thankfully, because we're a community, that pulling your credit actually doesn't hurt your credit. I keep hearing this, that checking your own credit can hurt. So can you clear the air about what the truth about that is?
Yes. So when you apply for, let's say, like a credit card or financing, they do what is called a hard pull. And so that's like when they're actually looking into your credit, and that can ding your credit score a little bit. And that's because a percentage of what makes up your credit score is like how many new accounts you have opened. To creditors, it looks a little bit suspicious if, let's say, you're opening up 5 new accounts in a month or something, or you're having like 5 new, businesses or banks kind of looking into your credit. It looks a little suspicious. But what sites like Credit Karma is a really good one that's totally free. You sign up for an account. They do what's called soft pulls, which do not hurt your credit at all. And so with Credit Karma, you can also sign up for like notifications and alerts, and they will alert you if a new account is opened in your name and you're like, I didn't open that. And that can help with any sort of fraud and things like that. But it can also be a really good source to look at your credit score. What are the things that are on your credit report? Or once a year, pulling your actual full credit report from annualcreditreport.com is also a good free resource that does not hurt your credit score at all.
Okay, excellent. And one of the ways, what is your opinion on this? Carrying cash with you versus using a credit card. I know it's different for everybody. And because I know, for example, I can just speak for myself. When I have cash in my pocket, it lasts forever because I'm actually able to think about what I'm spending and I can calculate it. And that, in my mind, there's a budget there. Whereas opposed to having a credit card, sometimes it's not the same mindset. So for someone who has $0, someone who's trying to, we're also talking mindsets too. So thankfully you're also a therapist in that sense as well. So how do you get on the right track for smart spending?
Yeah. I would definitely not recommend credit cards to beginners. So I think it's just, you don't need to waste your time on it personally until you have mastered the basics of like, how much am I spending per month? Am I paying all my bills on time? Do I have enough money left over? Like those things need to be mastered first before you're even like talking about credit cards. So I think a cash system works really great for people that need more of that emotional connection to your money. Sometimes with a card, it is there's a disconnect there, right? It's just kind of like, I'm swiping my card. I'm not sometimes like having that physical money. And if you've heard of like an envelope system where let's say you get paid, you take all of your money out in cash, and then you separate that cash into different envelopes. So one is maybe groceries, one is gas, one is like your rent or utilities or all of these other bills. And so that can be a really good, easy way to start kind of managing your money, especially if more of like that physical touch element of that helps versus kind of a lot of like the budgeting spreadsheets and stuff can feel very overwhelming for people.
Yes.
But again, you know yourself best. So if I give myself $100 to spend for the whole month on like fun stuff or just stuff that is, not necessarily like a necessity, and then maybe I actually spend that better than if I just tell myself I'm going to spend $100 this month, and I typically tend to go over. So I think the cash can be really helpful as like a physical reminder of where your money is and where it's going to.
I see. So it sounds like also goal setting is very important in this. So obviously, I have a friend who's a realtor, and looking at, rent where I am in Florida, just a tiny one is $2,000 a month. So people are trying to buy houses right now, or even set that goal. So coming from zero to owning a home and having established credit, it seems extremely overwhelming to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to doing those small changes over time. So, but it's really helpful, I think, to have a goal to want to work on your finances. If you're just like, I should save money to save money, it's really boring, right? Versus I want to save money and I want to fix my credit so that one day I can own a home. And that's a goal of mine. Or maybe the goal is something different, but let's just go with like this home ownership goal. So now we have this very large goal. What are the different steps that it takes to get there? Well, you do have to have decent credit in order to, be approved for a mortgage. So that's one goal, is I need to maybe fix my credit or get more of a credit history. Because a lot of times if you haven't ever had any credit history, that also looks quote unquote bad, even though you haven't done anything, but it's just no history is also bad. So maybe I do need to start looking into opening up a very, low credit card that has no annual fee or anything, but just start charging a few purchases to there to kind of bring up my my credit score. And then there's like the issue of I need to save money for a down payment and, maybe like a little bit of some extra savings for what if the AC breaks when I move in, or all those things that come up when you own a home.
Because you don't want to be house poor. I just learned what house poor is. That's very common, because in our we got married at 28, and then our 30s, we bought this house that was, it really should have been a knockdown, but we're doing what people are supposed to do. We got the big ass SUV. We got that colonial house, and we walked in and then we're like, oh my God, the roof is leaking. What? Yeah. So on paper, we could afford the house, but we really couldn't afford the house.
Yes. And that's what's happening right now with a lot of the very low mortgage interest rates. It's very like 2008 era when everyone got into mortgages because they were hot and it was like the thing to do. And now the bubble bursts and you can't afford the house that you're in. So definitely making sure that you want a house. Just because, you're supposed to have a house doesn't mean you have to choose to own a home. You can choose to rent. And B, like, how much do I want to be spending per month on this? And don't just look at it mortgage payment versus rent payment, because there's a lot more that goes into when you own a home versus rent. Like, I personally rent. I don't have to pay, homeowners insurance. I have renter's insurance. I have my rent, and then I don't have to pay anything beyond that besides utilities and such. But, something breaks, I don't have to pay for that versus with a home. So making sure that you're truly getting the number.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people, I don't want to be so broad, but I have heard, and I've caught myself even thinking that, well, if I'm going to pay this amount in rent, I could get a mortgage for less, but I can't get approved for a mortgage.
Yes. Yeah. But it's like, so say, for example, you pay, $1,200 as your rent payment or whatever. And then you could get a mortgage for like even less money, let's say like $1,100. You have to pay homeowners insurance. You have to have, if anything breaks, like you're responsible for fixing it, property taxes, all of the other kind of stuff that goes along, furnishing your house, all of that stuff. Utilities are going to be probably a little bit more than a smaller apartment space. Garbage, like all of that stuff you're paying for. So making sure that when you're doing the math on it, you're adding in those expenses too, and not just, it's just like a mortgage versus like a rental amount. It's not the same comparison.
Oh my God, that makes so much sense. And being able to walk away and just even renting and all the things that you just mentioned seems to be a good kind of starting off point as to figuring out what exactly you can afford, and maybe you can in your job in that moment. Something else that was presented to me is the differences in credit cards. And I noticed that when you have shoddy credit or not established credit, the interest rates are really high. Some people take out department store credit cards. What is the difference between Visa and Mastercard? I don't know brands. So these are questions that people are afraid to ask. So I was wondering if you can address that as well.
So with credit cards, like Visa or Mastercard or American Express or Discover, those are like the four main brands. So those are the companies that are like lending you the money. But let's say, like, for example, I have a Chase credit card. So Chase is the bank that it's under, but it's a Visa card. And so that's like the merchant that's paying for it. So depending on where you go, like I was just at Costco yesterday, and Costco does not accept any Mastercard cards for some reason. It only accepts Visa. So that's like the weird discrepancies between there. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, but then a lot of Visa is on a lot of debit cards, and you don't want to.
So like Visa and Mastercard are the two main ones that you can pretty much count on being accepted like everywhere. And then depending on your credit score, they may give you a different interest rate. So when you apply for a credit card, they may be like, oh, wow, you have really high credit, so we're going to give you like a 15% interest rate versus someone else make it like a 24% interest rate. Now, if you're using credit cards to build your credit score and you're paying them off every month, it honestly doesn't matter what the interest rate is, because like me personally, I'm not carrying a balance on them. So it could be 30% interest, but I'm paying them off every month. So I'm not paying them any interest.
Only applies to the balance.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
The balance that you're carrying after your bill cycle. So let's say you spend money from like July 1 to July 30th. Your bill cycle ends on the 30th and you have to pay your bill by August 15th. So you have from all of your spending from July until August 15th to pay off whatever you spent before you're accruing any interest. So after the bill due date is due and you haven't paid off your balance in full, whatever your balance is, then they're going to start accruing interest on that. And they do like a daily balance. It's a lot of interest. So again, do not use a credit card unless you have plans to pay it off in full every month, or like it's a crazy emergency. Like I had to put my dog's emergency surgery on a credit card a few years ago, and it is what it is. But those situations happen.
And the minimum payment is, what does that actually go to? Is that going toward, because I've heard paying the minimum payment does nothing. It just kind of morale boost, if nothing else.
Yeah. Because it's like, well, so you have to look at it from the bank's perspective. They are loaning you this money and they want you to pay interest, right? Like that's how they make money. They make money off of you by you paying them interest for this money that they have loaned you. So, with my credit cards, I'll have a $2,000 or $3,000 balance on there at the end of the month. And it's like, pay $25. That's your minimum payment. And so you could be like, oh, $25, I can pay that. That's way better, easier to handle than $2,000, right? But then that $25 is probably not even paying for like a day of interest on your purchases. So never really go by the minimum monthly payment unless, again, if you're putting things on it, like if you put an emergency on a credit card that you can't pay off, you want to make sure that you're paying at least the minimum monthly payment every month. Otherwise, that goes against your credit score. But I don't even look at the minimum monthly payment. I just look at what is the total balance, and that's what I'm paying off.
I noticed too that a lot of credit cards will increase your limit without even really telling you. And so you may have the same job, the same amount of income, the same debt, the same issues, but they increase your limit. Is there a way to not want your limit increased, and why do they do that? And what are some ways around that kind of getting abused or frustrating someone?
Yeah. So first of all, the credit limit is, so when you apply for a credit card, they just ask you, how much do you make per year? And I do believe they base it on your gross and not even like your post-tax account or your post-tax income. So they just kind of ask you. They don't really verify a lot of that. So that's kind of sketchy. And so then they'll give you a credit limit based on that. So let's say your credit limit is like $5,000 based on the income that you provided to them. And so in terms of your credit score, you want to make sure that you're never using more than 30% of that credit limit. And that credit limit applies across all of your cards. So if you have, let's say, 2 cards, each of them have a $5,000 credit limit, then your total credit limit is $10,000. And you don't want to use more than 30% of that, which would be $3,000, right? Yeah. So just so you know that. So it's not like, oh, I have $10,000 and I can spend up to. It's like you really don't want to use more than 30% of your credit limit, because again, that's telling the bank that you're not responsible with your money, even though they've given you the credit limit. So you have to kind of play the game. It is. It's a trap. Credit score is a huge trap. Credit cards can be really tricky. That's why I don't really recommend them to people unless you're trying to build your credit score, or you are know your finances enough that you can be responsible with them and want them for the perks.
Unless you really know what you're doing. Yeah. That's why I had you on there, is because there is so much noise out there. One of the other things I want to segue into is mindset and feeling like not only that money's great. Money can do good things in the
Yes.
hands of good people. So I was wondering if you can speak to the needs of people who are feeling down. Many people in this religion are being shunned and have lost their whole social structure. So to get someone to co-sign for them might be a huge challenge. Some people are losing spouses. When you're shunned and excommunicated from your community, it's very, very damaging. So to at least feel that you can be empowered and take control of your finances is such a huge part of it. Can you speak to the mindset of someone who's going through that?
Yeah, I think it is really hard, especially when you haven't gotten that education. And I think not going into the cycle of like beating yourself up for where you're at, because we just don't know what we don't know. So if we were never given that education, or someone told us that it was important for us to learn these things, it's hard to know that you need to do X, Y, and Z. So kind of have some compassion for your situation with where you're at. And then know that everyone has to start somewhere. So what is maybe one small thing that I can do today to kind of figure out my finances? Maybe right now I don't have the credit score to be able to like apply for this loan and get approved. What is one thing that I can maybe do to help me get to there down the road? And a lot of stuff with personal finance just literally takes time. You have to take these small steps that add up over time, like saving money. You have to start with small little increments maybe at first, and same with your credit score. It just takes time for those things to improve. So giving yourself a little bit of grace and not putting this pressure on yourself to all of a sudden, like tomorrow, my finances are going to be amazing and figured out. It's going to be, years of work, and that's okay.
And willingness to, that it's going to be hard, and not be afraid to ask the questions that may seem silly, because again, it does seem like it. I think, and one thing my therapist helped me to appreciate, and he's going to say this on the video that I'm about to upload, is that it's not just in Jehovah's Witnesses or any religion for that matter. Feeling like you are a little behind is kind of a universal feeling, and there's not really much shame in that. One of the final questions I have for you is, when you do have these types of questions, it seems when you look up a financial advisor, they only really manage wealth. And to walk into a bank, they're trying to sell you bank stuff, bank product. So what is the best course of action for someone who has these kinds of questions and they don't know where to turn, and they're trying to avoid like a Reddit group or things like that?
I would definitely suggest looking into books. So personal finance books are a really great resource. You can check out books from your library for free, or it's like $15 to buy a book. And so again, there's lots of personal finance gurus. So finding one that maybe fits with what you're looking for, in terms of like what kind of life they're living and what kind of stuff that they talk about. But books are a really good resource. Podcasts are another really good resource where you can just get some free education. Doing some Google searches and finding people on like Instagram and social media is also a really good tool, because people are putting out lots of good free content. And again, with the free content, it's not going to be personalized to like your situation, but it can at least help maybe answer some of these questions that you have, or things that you didn't know, and kind of can give you a good starting point of things that you can look into deeper, or avenues that you can kind of take with your finances.
And when I was looking for you, I just needed a word, and I thought, I kept looking financial advisor, because I was looking for financial advice. But I found you under the hashtag financial literacy, and so I do believe that coaching is that's one of the reasons why I was drawn to you, was because coaching is, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to help you do what you need to do for you. So I was really, really impressed with the way that I really was impressed with your content. And you kind of go against the grain. You do talk about rent. And I was really, really happy to hear about that, because most people in my audience are in the rental situation. There is this stigma about renting and not really knowing what to do. So where can people find you if they want to start with the basics and move forward?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is Hannah Brown Inc. So that's HANNAHBROWNINC. So Hannah Brown INC on Instagram. And then I also have a podcast. So it's called Money Therapy. So you can search that wherever you listen to podcasts. So I have some good kind of just, those are totally free episodes, kind of share, random money tricks, money hacks, some personal, stuff and my personal finances and all of that. So that's where you can find me.
And I especially love that you're focusing on the millennial generation. And here's why. This religion, it seems to be what we're hoping that it goes kind of like downhill because of
extinct.
Because of the advancement in technology and information. And that particular age group, I'm born 1980, so I'm on the older end of millennial. And it seems that a lot of the millennials are really doing some amazing stuff with gathering information. So I'm grateful that you've been on this show. And is there anything else you'd like to add with regard to financial literacy that you find important for people in these circumstances?
I think you just need to, like you said, be willing to ask for help. So be willing to tap into any resources that are around you, people. Just kind of, I think the general theme of money is that we don't talk about it. And that extends to all of your personal relationships as well. Yes. But really the only way you can get better at it is by asking people questions and just starting small. So don't feel like I have to run this marathon overnight. It again is a marathon and not a sprint, but kind of breaking those larger goals down into smaller chunks of like, okay, this is one thing that I can do today to kind of better my personal finance literacy, and kind of tapping into your community resources, because there's actually probably a lot of education or things that you didn't know about that can be helpful just by asking for help in that way.
Wow, what an honor. And whether you're listening to this on the podcast or you're watching this on YouTube, please reach out to Hannah for all of your basic questions. I know I personally am going to sign up with Hannah to be a client after reading this or watching this, because there's so many questions that I do have. If you have more questions, please put them in the comments, and you can go to Hannah's Instagram, boost her algorithm, and ask her questions there.
Feel free to send me a DM if you have any questions or anything. I'm happy to chat with you there too.
Okay, and you take personal clients?
Yeah. So right now I have like money makeover sessions. So it's just like 90 minutes kind of to get your finances together, kind of figure out your goals and stuff like that. But yeah, you can ask me questions and stuff on my Instagram as well.
Well, that's great. And maybe in the future, we can have you back on for a different topic of finances. Maybe
yes.
Thing. Thank you so much, Hannah. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.